Next, please join me in welcoming Sebastian Gier. He's an award-winning designer, international speaker on innovation and the co-founder of Footprint Intelligence, the digital climate tech startup that uses AI to reduce emissions for digital tech and service companies. With work experience spanning Bosch, Harvard University, and numerous startups in fintech, Web3, AI, and AR, he brings a wealth of knowledge and global perspectives to the stage. His remarkable journey includes designing future mobility experiences at BMW Group and collaborating with tech giants like Apple, Google, and Amazon. After working for many years at BMW on the intersection of technology, sustainability, and design, Sebastian co-founded Footprint Intelligence in order to accelerate global carbon reduction and empower it for every business, utilizing the power of AI. Let's hear his keynote exploring AI's role in the fight for digital sustainability.
All right. Hi, everyone. So today I'm going to talk about digital sustainability and AI, and how are these two topics actually connected to each other. Two topics that are, of course, of growing importance. And to kind of kick things off, I think it's really important to keep in mind, like, how do we actually approach such a topic, also at Footprint Intelligence? So the way we do it is usually in a three-step process. There's a good saying that, measure twice, cut once. We don't need to measure twice, but we definitely need to analyze before. We need to measure. So you analyze what the emissions are at the very beginning, and from there on, you try to make a strategic decision what could be the most intelligent ways to reduce that carbon footprint profile. And that's what's called decarbonization. So how can you actually reach 10%, 20%, 30% of carbon reduction and ultimately science-based targets and climate targets? And the last step is the engaging part. So how can we then take that impact that has been created with a company and then communicate it, or how that company can communicate it to their employees, investors, customer. So this is the three-step process. And just to give you a bit of outline, what's the importance here? Like, why is this topic actually relevant? So just mentioning 4 topics here. Number 1, there are increasing regulations coming into play. And this is both in the EU happening, in the US, and I think Australia just today published also a lot of regulations. So, and there are climate targets for companies that they need to achieve, or certain countries and, for example, the EU need to achieve. But looking at the current statistic, we're not really on track. Actually, globally, we're hitting an all-time emission high this year again, despite all of these targets and ambitions and investments that happen in the space. And I'm going to touch a little bit on that in a second. The other part is increasing competition. So for employers and companies, more and more, there's transparency for people that are purchasing products, for people that are looking for jobs, what the emission profile of companies are to the streamline of reporting. So there's more and more transparency and competition happening between companies. There's also more and more KPIs. So on the one side, that means for sustainability managers, often climate targets that the goal publishes and wants to achieve. But very often there are targets, but there's no process and there's no way actually to reach these targets, which is the exact problem. And then customers also having higher and higher expectations what actually sustainability means, and a traditional method like offsetting and traditional carbon certificates are more and more questioned also from customers as the only path moving forward. So we actually need real decarbonization. So how to approach that? So the first thing, starting with analyzing, we usually look at 3 aspects. So you need to get data from supplier, you need to get data from employees, and you need to get data from customer. So one way here to use AI to take that unperfect data as it's coming from different parts and read it in a way so you can actually analyze it faster, because a lot of companies are stuck in that analyzing part. They don't really move forward into actual decarbonization because they just keep analyzing and reporting. But if you're talking to sustainability managers, like one of the main motivations, of course, like they want to actually drive impact. So coming to that is really important. And The way also we're using AI and how you can use AI there is to take that data and read it in a better way, in a faster way, because oftentimes that's just available in imperfect ways. You need to make sense of the data. But it's also about user experience. So another things like how can you actually engage your suppliers, how can you actually engage your employees, how can you actually engage your customers into that process to they're willing to contribute data, yeah? And they're feeling involved. So user experience is really important for us here as well. And then from there on, you can actually derive quantified decarbonization actions. So if you have the profile of a company, understanding what actions actually makes sense for their business. And as part of a carbon reduction journey, that requires not just one action, that requires multiple actions, sometimes 20, 30, 40, 50, depending on like what the fidelity of your decarbonization strategy is. But the way we are using it is to understand what these actions are going to actually have as far as impact if they're going to be implemented. And that you can calculate. And there's a growing database of actions and best practices across companies, what are companies doing and what can be learned across companies, and then understanding what would make most sense for that business. Because in the end, every emission profile looks different. Yeah? And then when it comes to digital, so we're primarily working in the digital space. I'm going to touch a little bit in a second why digital is actually important. So why is the IT actually an important sector when it comes to sustainability? But when it comes to IT, we're looking at 4 stages. So the first one is the development of an IT project. So that means the development of the operations. For example, how does the employee come to work, but this is also what kind of system they're using to create the product in the first place or the project, and there are multiple ways how you can lower that. But it's also the hardware that people are using at work. So that's the development part. For many companies, this can be the highest part of their emission profile. The next part is the storing part. So the data actually has to be stored somewhere. And this is also where a lot of carbon emissions get created because they may be storing too much data. And there are multiple ways how you can lower that. And the interesting thing here is that oftentimes all of these things, they go along with performance improvements. So if you improve the IT project as far as sustainability, very often that means also you just make the performance of the IT project better. So these things often go hand in hand. And the next part is the transmission. So how does the data actually come to the end device? And then the use phase. So the actual person in the end using an IT project or the execution of that. And the device size plays an important aspect here as well. For example, Netflix has a really high emission profile per user. The reason for that is that, and this is similar to other big video streaming companies, not specifically to Netflix, the problem is happening on big screens. And it's, of course, high bandwidth content. So the screen size actually plays an important role as well, and what the resolution is that gets consumed there. So from there on, depending on what makes sense for that business, you can forecast what that impact is going to be. So you can also start to communicate, hey, we're going to do these 5 things and we're going to save 20% of carbon emissions. Now, as part of that decision-making process, we also learned it's not just about carbon emissions. Carbon emissions is one part, but it's also about like the investment that is needed in order to do anything. How much technical difficulty is there in an execution of a measure? Is there communication value in it? Do I do something that actually nobody is going to like to read about it afterwards? So these are all nuances that need to be incorporated in that decision-making process. So let's talk a little bit about the carbon impact of the IT industry. Who thinks that the carbon emissions of the aviation industry is actually higher than the IT industry? Raise your hand if you think so. Aviation being higher than the IT industry. So the reality actually, and depends a little bit on the research study you look at, it's similar. Yeah? So information technology globally is already equaling the aviation industry, which is interesting because we all talk about the aviation industry all the time, but we don't really talk about information technology so much, right? So, and now the bad news is information technology, also to the effect of AI, is going to grow 2.5-fold in the next 6 years. Yeah, so 2030 is right now at 4% global carbon emission share. IT industry globally is going to be 10% by 2030 projected, and there are even studies that are going to say there's going to be a lot more. And the reason for that is one of the reasons is new technologies like AI. Because AI uses a lot more energy. Yeah? Now, the interesting aspect why IT is sort of a pivotal aspect of the global decarbonization is also that IT impacts human behavior. And human behavior is at the core of global decarbonization. What decisions are people making on the B2C side, but also on the B2B side. So information technology is very present as far as the decision making because we're consuming so much screen content these days. The other thing is that IT is present in all industries. So it's something that is across all industries. And therefore, it also plays an important role in the decarbonization. So I think it's really important to keep in mind that AI is actually not just harming, this is not just a difficulty around like what it means for humanity, but there's also an impact beyond humanity, which is about the environment. Yeah? So new research found that 10 to 50% of Google's electricity consumption is already coming through AI, for example. So keep in mind, really think twice if you need AI in the product that you're creating. Yeah, does it make sense? And then if you apply it to AI, see if it actually, how big the model has to be. Do you store a lot of unnecessary data? Can you actually keep it small? Yeah, only focus on the things that you're trying to solve with a UI solution. And then apply what we like to call a AAA process. So think about, does it automate something? Yeah? Does it augment the human behavior? Or does it help to analyze something that would require a lot of time to do in a manual way? And then use AI only where it actually has a significant positive impact. Because digital can actually be an important decarbonization driver. And I'd like to leave you with that. So let's push forward AI and use it to make the world more intelligent, but also use it in an intelligent way and only where it makes sense. Thank you so much.